Welcome to Kendall and Cooper Talk Mysteries. I'm Julie Cooper, a mystery writer and half of the duo bringing you this regular podcast series. Before my colleague Wendy Kendall introduces our special guests, that's right, there are 4 of them this time, I wanted to thank my brother Chris Squires for his imaginative gift of music, our theme song called The Man in the Panama Hat. Wendy, you're on.
All right. Well, today we want to talk about imagination, which has no limits. How wonderful that we each have an imagination that has no limits. A writer's imagination makes a wonderful story from everyday ingredients, sometimes by putting together everyday things that aren't normally found together. The reader's imagination is then ignited by the writer's work, and together, stories then take on a life of their own that's a bigger, funnier, sillier, scarier, more exciting, more adventurous. Well, you get the idea. The power of imagination grows stronger the more it's used and the more we get to read. Our guest author today is inspiring the next generation of mystery lovers. For all you kids who are already fans, you know and appreciate the thrilling mysteries Stuart Gibbs writes with his vivid imagination. We're recommending these exciting mysteries. Parents, here's a chance to discover books you'll want to share with your kids, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, and other kids in your life. And today, we're all going to learn about imagining and writing mystery. Stuart Gibbs is the New York Times bestselling author of 4 fast-paced, fun, and entertaining mystery series: Spy School, Fun Jungle, Moonbase Alpha, and Last Musketeer. As if that's not enough, he's also written the screenplays for movies like See Spot Run and Replicate. He's developed TV shows for Nickelodeon, Disney Channel, ABC, and Fox, and he's researched capybaras, the world's largest rodents. Welcome, Stuart Gibbs.
Well, thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Thanks for joining
We're
us.
so glad to have you here. I'm going to jump right into some questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
Stuart, there's a strong environmental thread running through many of your books, which stresses protecting endangered animals in our ecosystem. Can you tell us more about why it's important to weave this issue into your books?
I think that this is the most important issue we have on our planet right now is the environment. And I don't think, well, I know I'm not the only person who thinks this, but I think it's actually something that really matters to my target audience, to kids. I mean, they're the ones who are going to grow up and inherit this planet. And I think, when you go up to any kid in the world and say, do you care about the planet? Do you care about animals? And they're going to say, yeah, those are really important things to them. And sadly, when people get older, they stop going to the zoo as much or things like that. But it's just it's an issue that resonates with them. And I think they deserve to know what my generation and the generations before have done to this planet and what we've done wrong, and maybe some of the things that we're starting to figure out we've done wrong, and how to correct those mistakes, and what we need to do in the future to make sure that we're not the last generation of people that can see a rhinoceros in the wild or an elephant in the wild, or can even in America go off and see wild bears or animals like that.
Great. Well, thank you for bringing that issue to the forefront. I agree. It's very, very important for every generation. I've enjoyed your books and noted that the cover art and graphics, especially for Spy School and Fun Jungle, are exceptionally well done, and they'd be wonderful as posters. How much artistic input did you have as an author on the final result, or did you turn an artist loose on the covers?
I'm incredibly lucky with my covers. I actually do have some of the covers up as posters in my office. I was lucky enough to get a fantastic designer named Lucy Cummins. And Lucy's actually an art director at my publisher. And she does not do the art for very many people, but it just worked out very fortuitously that she was my designer. She usually hits it right out of the park on the first try. She just is so talented and so funny, and so she usually gets it right. But she's also very open to me giving my input. So on the Spy School cover, originally it was not a silhouette. You saw the face of the spy, and it didn't work quite as well. We actually, that one went through one or two back and forth before we kind of hit on that perfect iconic cover. And then it was Lucy's idea to just keep taking that silhouette and putting it in different scenarios. And now half the time when I'm trying to come up with even an idea for that series, I just think, what would Lucy do if my spy was skiing? What would Lucy do if my spy was at the beach? And that alone drives a huge a bit of what I'm thinking about for future books. And Lucy just like half the time she sends me actually not half the time, 90% of the time she sends me the first draft of the cover, and I just love it.
Perfect. Well, she captures so well the essence of your books. I think it's just a perfect partnership.
Really feels
Reading your spy school stories, you've combined an easy conversational style with humor, and you never give the reader the feeling that you're talking down to them. I mean, your style is very accessible, whatever your age. How do you strike that balance?
I'm trying to write a book that I would have liked when I was a kid. And I'm trying to, I do write in first person for these books, but it's important to me to have a character who is pretty smart character, who is going to talk like a kid, but at the same time, occasionally might drop a big word that I think is particularly funny into their narrative or something like that. And because I think kids like that, they like to be challenged. The last thing a kid wants is a book that's written down to them. So you're trying to write something that's on their level. I'm really, for the most part, writing a book from the point of view of a 12-year-old that I actually think that even an adult would try and read, or an adult would enjoy reading, I should say.
Yes, definitely.
Absolutely. I'd have to agree. Sure. Would you ignite our listeners' imaginations with a reading from one of your mysteries for us?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I thought I would read from a little bit from Belly Up, which was the first mystery I did, and
oh, good.
For those of you who aren't aware, this is a mystery series that takes place at a zoo called Fun Jungle. It's not a normal zoo; it's like a zoo theme park, and it's like somebody took your local zoo and combined it with Disney World. And so and one of the things is the animal exhibits here are sort of like the animal exhibits I dreamed my zoo would have when I was a kid. And so I thought I would read a scene where Teddy, who's the hero, this mystery is about someone has murdered the mascot of Fun Jungle, which is a hippopotamus. And Teddy has gotten some evidence that this was murder, and he can't get the police to investigate. They don't believe him. So he's investigating himself, and he's met the owner of the park, Summer McCracken, and he's gotten to know her, and she has asked him to come meet her at the right by the Black Mamba exhibit in the reptile building called World of Reptiles, which is a huge, amazing thing with animatronic dinosaurs and things like that at the end, which I am well aware are not reptiles, and Teddy points this out as well in the book. But
cool.
So this is when Teddy's realizing that maybe something's wrong with. He's just got a text from Summer, and he's starting to get a little suspicious of what's going on. Why had she wanted me to meet here? I wondered again. Was there something important about the mamba? I turned my attention to the exhibit. Even among poisonous snakes, mambas aren't that interesting. They don't have the flared hood of a king cobra, the horns of a rhinoceros viper, the beautiful patterns of a coral snake. They're just black, thin and black, which makes them very hard to find. I've always been good at spotting animals, but the mamba didn't seem to be anywhere in its case. As I leaned against the glass, it shifted slightly. That seemed wrong. I took a step back and something crunched under my foot. I looked down. The floor was covered with tiny glass shavings. They reminded me of the time in the Congo when Dad had to jury-rig a new windshield for the Land Rover and had to cut the glass himself. Cut the glass? I looked back up at the exhibit. At the top, there was a 2-inch gap where the glass had been removed. It was above my head, but there were several branches inside the exhibit from which the mamba could have easily accessed the gap and escaped. 2 heat lamps were on in the exhibit, but it was cool out in the hall. The mamba, being cold-blooded, probably wouldn't have gone far after getting out. The floor was black. The walls were black. The nearby planter was black, exactly the same color as a mamba. Now, I felt my blood go cold. I looked around wildly, trying to locate the snake. To my dismay, the hall was kept quite dark in order to focus everyone's attention toward the exhibits. There were shadows everywhere. All I could see was blackness. Something hissed behind me. My ears prickled. In all my years in Africa, I'd never run into a poisonous snake, but Mom had given me explicit instructions about what to do if it happened. The trick was to make no sudden movements. Even an aggressive snake like the mamba wouldn't attack me unless it felt threatened. However, I couldn't stay frozen like a statue for hours either. I had to figure out where the snake was. I twisted my head around slowly as I could, struggling to keep my arms and legs still. The hissing suddenly came from my right. I leapt, startled, unable to control myself, and slammed into the glass of the mamba exhibit. I whirled to my right, expecting the sting of fangs in my ankle at any second, and saw the source of the noise. The irrigation system had kicked on for the tropical. Tiny sprinkler heads hissing as they sprayed water into the soil. I immediately felt foolish, but had no sense of relief. The mamba was still close, and now I made a sudden movement. Panic surged through me. I imagined the snake closing in from the shadows. I couldn't stay still any longer. There was a groan from behind me. The glass from the mamba exhibit had popped loose from its mooring in the wall. It toppled. I ran. An adrenaline rush is an incredible thing. I was already 50 yards away by the time the glass shattered on the floor. Definitely a near Olympic time for the distance, and I'd had to negotiate corners. I hurtled into the dinosaur exhibit, racing toward the exit, fearing the mamba's bite at every step, alert to every movement, every noise. I rounded a stand of fake trees, and something lunged at me. I leapt away screaming and stumbled over my feet. It was the dang velociraptor. It didn't look anything like a mamba, of course, but I was too freaked out to control my reaction. I lost my balance, tumbled over the railing, and thudded into the Triassic period. A Tyrannosaurus suddenly loomed over me, roaring and gnashing its serrated teeth. I wasn't concerned by it so much as the floor around me. There were fake plants everywhere, creating a thousand hiding places. Beneath all of them stretched dozens of electrical cables for the dinosaurs, each thin and black like a mamba. To my right, only 2 feet away, one of them twitched.
Whoa!
Oh, that really creeped me out. Thank you.
That's exciting. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that reading.
Sure.
Thank you, Stuart.
Well, our listeners might be wondering, how did Julie and I sort of discover Stuart Gibbs on our reading list? And the way we did is one of Stuart's books was recommended to the Podners by one of his fans, Anna Foy. Anna turned in a beautifully written book recommendation for a library contest last fall recommending Spy School. Welcome, Anna, as our guest. Would you tell our listeners a little about yourself?
Hello, I'm in the 6th grade and I love to dance, play sports, and read.
Great. Welcome, Anna. Anna, I was hoping that you would read us your book recommendation so that our listeners can understand the appeal of this book.
Okay. Benjamin Ripley goes to a science school, but it is secretly a training school for smart and clever children who have potential to be spies. Although Benjamin is very smart, he may not be as skilled as the other kids in the school. He will have to prove to everyone else that he can be a spy. I recommended this book because it's funny and enjoyable to read about Benjamin Ripley and his surprising adventure. About the author. Stuart Gibbs has a wife and children. He lives in Los Angeles.
Well, that is a wonderful description of the book, Anna, and I cannot thank you enough for your great recommendation of the book and for turning the Podners onto it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you so much, Anna. Do you have any questions, Anna, for your author?
Yes. What gave you the idea for Spy School?
I actually came up with the idea for Spy School when I was around your age. That I had seen my first James Bond movie. Have you seen a James Bond movie yet?
No.
No, you haven't. It's all right. That's okay. But you know he exists, right? You've heard of James Bond, right?
Yes.
And so I saw my first James Bond movie, and I just I loved it. And because I was always interested in writing, I went home and I started writing my own story about James Bond's son, Jimmy Bond. And in my story, I had this idea that Jimmy wanted to be a spy like his dad, but his dad was always off traveling around. So Jimmy had to go to a top secret spy school. So I really had this idea when I was your age. So I think it's important to know that if anybody out there who's young wants to write and you've got ideas now, those ideas can they can. If you think it's a great idea, it probably is a great idea, and one day it may take you a couple of years, but you can actually get that idea published.
Cool. Who is your favorite character to write about?
I do feel very close to Ben, my hero in this, but my favorite character to write in the series is Erica Hale, who is the best spy at Spy School, and I don't know, Erica's just one of my favorite characters I've ever come up with.
Yes. And will you continue the Spy School series?
I'm definitely continuing the Spy School series. There are 5 books in it so far, but the 6th book is going to come out this fall in September, October. I don't know if we have the exact date yet, and that's called Spy School Goes South. And to go back to our covers, I think this one has the best cover yet. And then I'm going to be doing a 7th book the year after this too, so 2019.
Cool. Thank you.
Wonderful. And thank you, Anna, for your questions. Stuart, you've dealt with a whole lot of unusual and exotic animals in your Fun Jungle series. Is there any favorite animal among that bunch?
I've always liked elephants, which I just think are just the most amazing animal ever. But in the process of doing the research of these books, I really come to love rhinos and hippos as well. But rhinos in particular are just some of them they're like the sweetest animals you've ever met in your whole life. It's like having a Labrador Retriever that weighs 2 tons. And so I couldn't say enough good things about rhinos.
That really surprises me somehow.
I think that's part of what's so neat is that it surprises everybody.
I don't think of something that's armored like a tank as being warm and lovable, but
Really,
I'll take your word for that.
This is not all of them, and sort of differs by species, but like the most armored one, which is the Indian rhino, is just they can be just. I wouldn't recommend having one as a pet, but some zoos will actually have things where you can feed them and pet them, and they don't let you do that with just any animal. It has to be a relatively docile animal to let you do that.
Okay, fascinating. And are there any writers' conferences that you could recommend for someone who either wants to write middle grade fiction or for a young writer who wants to write fiction?
To be totally honest, I don't know of that many conferences specifically for the writing of this, but most book festivals really do have places where you can go, and they'll have like a middle grade section where you can meet the authors and things like that. And every middle grade author I've met is really just a wonderful person and open to talking to people about how the process works. There's always great panels and things like that. The best middle grade festival I know of in the country is the North Texas Teen Book Festival, which is not that accessible for everybody because it's outside of Dallas. But that is a fantastic festival to go and meet authors. And it's one of the few that's specifically for middle grade and YA. But there's a lot of great book festivals all around the country, and if you go to those things, you can always get a little bit of time to talk to a writer, and they're always happy to. I've met them, I've seen them. They're in action. They're always happy to talk to people who go through the trouble to show up.
Great. Well, that sounds like a good place to start for someone that wants to start writing. Wendy, do you have more questions?
I do. You know, Stuart, you have such wonderful, adventurous lead characters in your series. What do you feel are the important character traits for a hero?
The very first one I think that's most important is intelligence, and that I always what I love about mysteries is that a mystery is a story where the smartest person wins. That they don't have to be great at, like, they don't have to be like James Bond, able to fight people or jump a motorcycle on top of a moving train. But being smart is their superpower, and they can figure out what the bad guys are up to and then figure out how to defeat them. So that's important to me. But I also don't really like how smart people are portrayed a lot of the time, because a lot of the time in our society they're shown as geeks or nerds, and that is not my experience with really smart people. I've met certified geniuses, and they tend to be really adventurous, fun, gregarious, often hilarious people. And this is not just a new thing. I mean, we have this vision of like Albert Einstein as this, sort of crazy old man with wacky hair or whatever. But, when he was younger, he was actually a great athlete, and his fellow scientists were. And they would have skiing competition, they would have hiking together. And so I think it's important for kids to realize that what a smart person is really like. And so it's important to me to have these really smart, adventurous characters. And then, maybe for me to have, if I'm doing a character who's investigating a crime, they do need to be pretty brave. They sometimes need to break the rules a little bit when the rules are not necessarily there for all the right reasons. So they maybe need to have a little bit of a rebellious streak to them as well.
And why are friends important to a lead character?
It's funny. I'm working on Spy School 7 today, and I was honestly writing something about this very topic that today. A sort of a scene between Ben and my heroine Erica Hale about why this exact thing, and that nobody can do anything alone. You're always stronger as a team. Everybody's got different strengths, and you might think that your friends are going to hold you back or other people hold you back, but if you work together with people, you're going to be able to solve more problems than you can by yourself.
Oh, that's really insightful. I like that. Well, what do mysteries bring to younger readers that is different than what other books bring to younger readers?
I will say I'm going to quote a good friend of mine here, a writer named James Ponti, who does the fantastic Florian Bates series, Framed and Vanished. And James has said that mystery is really, it's an interactive story. That is, you can play along with a mystery while you're reading it, and you get the same information your hero has, and you get to look at those clues and see if you can solve the mystery, and sometimes you do, and you feel proud about it, and sometimes they solve the mystery and you don't, and you say, wow, I should have put that together. And in that sense, it's like the mystery is like the very first video game or something that you really can play with it and see if you get it right.
Great. Well, I encourage everyone, all of our listeners, to visit your website, stuartgibbs.com. You've got so many great activities and information about your books, and you also have information about ways we all can help to save the world's environment. You're so generous in offering a lot of your time to teach kids and adults through your writing, visits at schools, interviews, this website, and so much more. What is it that kids teach or inspire in adults?
I think there's a lot of stuff that kids have that we lose as adults. That's a tremendous shame. like I was talking about how important the environment is before, and how passionate kids are about things like that. That they really care about something like that. If you say to a kid, there is a good chance this animal is going to go extinct, the kid gets really upset, and they say, what can I do? I think adults sometimes go like, well, it's a shame we can't do anything. I think kids have a tremendous, they have a lot more empathy. A young kid does not really judge somebody on what they look like at first. That's something that I think adults bring to them, and kids just have great imaginations. That if you read a story that a kid wrote, it will go to all these amazing places, and far more imaginative, I think, than a lot of things that adults write a lot of the time. So I just think that. Sadly, when people tell kids like, oh, you have to grow up and get mature at some point, we should really be saying to the adults, like, you need to act more like a child sometimes, and have this wonder and imagination and empathy that you had when you were a kid.
Nice. That's a great reminder. I love your Last Musketeer trilogy. At the start, you combine time travel, a rescue, adventure, and the beginning of the three musketeer warriors joining together as teens. You also give us strong female characters. What was the appeal to you for this? Was it the time in history, or was it those characters?
I think it was really that I had always wanted to do something with time travel. And to be full disclosure, the Last Musketeer was the one series I do. It was not fully my idea originally. That was brought to me by an editor named Dan Ehrenhaft. And he brought this idea, and I thought, man, that is a great way to get into the time travel thing. The Last Musketeers are these just iconic characters. It was my idea to say, well, let's see what they'd be like as teenagers when they all came together. And I had been in France relatively recently, and just thought it would be so much fun to find out what of the places I saw, would have still been kind of the same 400 years ago, what would have been different, and show how a modern day person would interact with all of that.
Do you have any more advice for kids who want to grow up to be writers and authors?
Well, everybody says write all you can, so I have to say that's the law. But I'll bring my own thing to this, which is that to sort of keep that imagination going. You always want to look for things that are going to. A lot of people say write what you know, but which is important, but you don't want to write the same thing everybody else does, right? Like everybody goes to school, everybody goes home from school every day, and so you're looking for what makes you special. What do you know that nobody else does? And so to that extent, I would say like chase your passions and always be curious, and write about the thing that makes you most excited. So I still write about things that excited me as a kid. I write about zoos and animals and space travel and time travel and being a spy. That's all stuff that fascinated me. But I still do a lot of research now. So I encourage kids to reading books is a great way, but also, if your parents ever come to you and say, hey, you want to go to the zoo today? You don't say, no, I don't want to. You say, yes, of course I want to go to the zoo. Or you go to them and say, I want to go to the zoo. I want to go to the Natural History Museum. I want to go for a hike. I want to go to the beach. All these things are great ways to inspire you and get you new ideas and get your imagination going.
Well, in addition to Stewart Gibbs' wonderful books, we wanted to take this opportunity to also share some other children book recommendations. During the library contest, we received another very well-written book recommendation from Sofia Solano. Welcome, Sofia. Would you tell our listeners a little about yourself?
Hi, my name is Sofia Solano. I'm from Managua, Nicaragua, which is in Central America. I'm in 6th grade. I moved here to the United States 2 years ago, and I really like it here. I like playing the piano, playing soccer, and reading.
Thanks, Sophia. That's great. When we invited Sophia to join us today to share her book recommendation, And she heard about our guest author and his books. She was excited to also read one of his books before the podcast. Sophia, which book did you choose to read, and what questions do you have for Stewart today?
I chose to read Spy School, and I really like your book because it's fiction, but it's realistic at the same time, and it seems like that could actually happen in real life. I also really liked the way you made the book and the story itself. It was really interesting, and it was really funny. And I believe this is one of the best books I've ever read in my life.
Wow. Well, that's very high praise. Thank you.
Sophia, what questions do you have for Stewart?
Why did you decide to write books for kids and not for adults?
To be honest, I actually originally, when I was your age and thinking about being an author, I really thought that I would grow up and write books for adults, and it just kind of happened. I did try to write a couple of books for adults over the years, and I think a lot of the ideas I had just seemed like they were in worlds that kids were more interested in. I wouldn't necessarily have said only kids are interested in something set at a zoo, but when I would talk to people about it, they would say, well, that sounds like a book for kids. And so I would think like, okay, well, maybe I need to write a book for kids then.
Thanks. How do you make your books? How do you get inspired?
Well, I'll start with the inspiration thing, which is that, as I sort of alluded to before, the advice I was giving to the kids about going out and being curious, I hold myself to that too. I do lots of research. I go behind the scenes at zoos when I can. With permission, I contact the zoo about that, and I chase down every lead I can get. From if I find somebody who works at NASA, I call them up. If I find somebody who works at the White House, I call them up, and I chase all these things down and start getting ideas and putting ideas together. And then I will do. I'll brainstorm about ideas sometimes for up to a year, and I'm working on other stuff, but I'm writing ideas down. I put that together in an outline. I write the first draft in about 3 to 6 months, and then I go back and forth with my editor for a couple times. So I'll do about 8 to 10 edits of a book. And once I'm into that phase, that's when my fantastic cover designer, Lucy Cummins, is going to work doing the design of the cover and for the book in general. And the publishing starts to get going then, and so it takes a while. They have to work out the format for the book. They have to get it published, and so then they, the whole process from the time I start writing to the time the book comes out is about 2 years.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's really interesting. What was the hardest or most challenging thing when you were writing Spy School?
I think maybe the most challenging thing is constantly trying to surprise my readers. That I'm trying to make it so it doesn't feel the same all the time. To constantly surprise you. There's always a mystery or a mystery element at least of what the bad guys are up to. So I want to keep the reader guessing about what that's up to. It's a lot of work to sort of keep that engine going and try and keep it as imaginative as I possibly can.
Well, you certainly do that. I had to interject. Sorry. That certainly describes your books. Sophia, would you share your original mystery book recommendation with our listeners? I think you were recommending The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin.
Yes, I was. The Westing Game is about 16 heirs that gather to hear the reading of Sam Westing's will. Sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
The Westing Game is about 16 heirs that gather to hear the reading of Sam Westing's will. The heirs are surprised to hear that one of them killed Sam Westing. Westing wants the heirs to play a game that will reveal who the murderer is. Who is the murderer? I recommend this book because it was a great story, and the characters and the book were so realistic. I think people that like murder and mystery books will enjoy The Western Game. About the author, Ellen Raskin wrote and illustrated over a dozen award-winning books for children and young adults in her lifetime. Raskin was awarded the Newbery Medal for the book The Western Game.
And I'm going to jump in here. I've got to add that Ellen Raskin was the illustrator for the first edition of Madeleine L'Engle's book, A Wrinkle in Time, which has finally been made into a film and I guess will be out in theaters this March. I'm looking forward to that too.
I have to jump in here, Sofia, and say I could not be happier that you picked The Western Game, because that is my favorite mystery from when I was your age, if not my favorite book. And when people ask me what they should read, that is always the book I tell them to read. So I'm so pleased that you found that.
Thank you. That is also my favorite mystery book and book.
Oh, great. Can I ask,
Sofia.
How did you find it? Were you just in the library? Did somebody recommend it to you?
Actually, when I was in 5th grade, I was supposed to read the book with my class and make an essay about it. Okay. So I learned from the book with my class, and I really enjoyed it.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Sure.
And there's one more thoughtful mystery book recommendation that we want to share with our listeners today. Michael Klug wrote a wonderful recommendation that was turned in during the library contest also. Welcome, Michael. Would you tell our listeners a little about yourself?
I like reading. I like reading again, and I love sports.
Oh boy, what's your favorite sport?
My favorite sport is flag football.
Oh, flag football. Wow.
Okay.
That sounds fun. Well, Michael, I'm hoping that you'd go ahead and share your mystery book recommendation with our listeners. I think that your book recommendation was Swindle by Gordon Corman.
Yeah. Kid named Griffin Bing plans a sleepover in an abandoned house, about to be demolished by morning. Finds a rare Babe Ruth baseball card hidden from the world until a mean collector named S. Wendell Palomino tricks him out of the card. Griffin puts together a team of friends to get the card back, and Griffin Bing, the man with the plan, won't let it go without a fight. I recommend this book if you like mysterious, funny, exciting, and almost impossible to stop reading book. Try the book Swindle, and it might just be the right book for you. Gordon Corman is an excellent author with details and lots of excitement in his writing.
I like the way you describe it too, Michael. It's great. It sounds exciting.
Sounds action-packed. Thank you, Michael.
I have to say I know this book as well. I think it's actually a great, fun book, and I think Michael did a great job pitching that. And I'll say one of the great things about being an author is I've gotten to meet Gordon Corman and become friends with him, because I grew up reading his books too, and it's one of those side effects of being an author you never necessarily imagine. And he's the nicest guy you've ever met as well. So great writer and a great guy.
Oh, nice. Well, Michael, I'm just wondering if you have any questions for Stewart Gibbs.
Yeah. What inspired you to make your first book or movie?
I guess it goes into saying, what was even my first book, and so technically, I would say that my first book was a book I wrote when I was younger than you guys, where I wrote a book about the dinosaurs coming back to life. So it was sort of like Jurassic Park before Michael Crichton got around to writing it. But then the real inspiration for Belly Up which was my first book, came from when I was in college. Even though I liked writing, I decided, because I believe, once again, I was always being curious, and I was studying biology. And I ended up doing this research on capybaras, the world's largest rodents, and I was doing it at a zoo. And I just started to see what happened behind the scenes at a zoo, and I realized that a zoo was just an excellent place to set a story.
Cool.
Right.
My other question to you is, how many authors have you met?
How many have I met? I
Yep,
have.
name a few.
Name a few. Will. Okay. So there was Gordon. I have met the great James Ponti, who I mentioned before, and Kevin Sands, who wrote The Blackthorn Key, which is another excellent mystery. I have met Sarah Mlynowski, Elizabeth Eulberg, Julia de Villers. There's so many. Oh my gosh! Now I feel like I've probably met Jason Reynolds. I've probably met 200 other authors. Pseudonymous Bosch. Adam Gidwitz. I mean, I'm just running through like my favorite, like people here who I've admired, and then I get to read them. So you really get to meet a lot of great authors when you're an author.
Wow.
Nice.
And finally, I have a last question to ask you. Around what age did you first get into the thing of writing?
I started to write from about the point I learned how to read. So I have stuff that I was writing when I was in kindergarten. Actually, it was just what I liked to do, and I was always doing it. I didn't get published until well after kindergarten, but I was always writing.
Thanks so much, Michael. Those were great questions.
They really were. Thanks.
And I loved your recommendation.
I
Julie.
did too.
Julie, what have you got for us today?
Well, I have a quick segment, and I'm titling it Reading Gives Us Wings. Reading is the best way I can think of to make imagination soar. How else can we visit distant lands and live in the future or enter the past? How else can we get outside of ourselves and become someone else? An explorer, a spy, a musketeer, or a paleontologist, even for a short time. My favorite early books were always mystery books, which included my older brother's Hardy Boy books, the Nancy Drew Mystery Series, and a favorite book called The Witch of Blackbird Pond by Elizabeth George Spear, a Newbery Medal Award winner. Set in colonial America, it featured a young girl named Kit Tyler. She moved from the Caribbean islands to the Puritan bleakness of the Connecticut colony, and she felt like a tropical bird completely out of place. Kit rebels against bigotry and suspicion, befriending an old woman who lives on the edge of the pond, and then is accused of witchcraft by her narrow-minded neighbors. As a young person, a young reader, this book allowed me to empathize with someone who didn't fit in, and to think, probably seriously for the first time, about the issue of discrimination. Certainly, a lot of the writing I've done as an adult would not have been possible without the wings all those books gave me, something for which I'll always be grateful.
Thanks, Julie. Well,
You're welcome.
I wanted to talk a little about Nancy Drew and imagination, because I didn't just read Nancy Drew books when I was a kid. I devoured Nancy Drew books. And I didn't just love Nancy. I wanted to be Nancy. These are the most wonderful kind of books, those that spark the reader's imagination so they immerse themselves in the story. I grew up in a joyful neighborhood because it was filled with kids that were all close to my age. There were always kids to play with. The girls enjoyed Nancy Drew, and thinking back on it, this group of gals may have been my first book club. We would share the books and talk about the mysteries and the characters, but why stop there? I would go around the neighborhood, our school, our own houses, and make up mysteries that we would then need to solve. Together, we would hunt for clues to anything, everywhere. We made up stories about things we'd find outside our neighbors' houses and lots of stories about the people. Our neighbors and teachers had no idea the intriguing lives we had them leading while living under aliases that we invented. We'd watch and follow who we decided were the current day suspects. There was one house in particular on a neighboring street that was very large, taking up like half a block, and the yard was not kept up at all, and only rarely did we see people there with mysterious comings and goings. This house intrigued us the most and scared us. We would dare each other to investigate this and that, always discussing the dangers we could face in exhaustive detail. I really don't remember now any of the multitudes of mysteries or that we ever solved anything at all, but I do remember that we had wonderful times together for hours and hours and weeks on end. And I do remember the great fun I had with very dear childhood friends, thanks to the inspiration from the Nancy Drew books. Carolyn Keene is the pseudonym of the multiple authors of the Nancy Drew stories. One of these ghostwriters was Susan Wittig Albert. She's also a prolific cozy mystery writer, including her beloved series of The Darling Dahlias. The character, Nan Drew, which was lengthened to Nancy Drew before the first book's publication, was created by publisher Edward Stratemeyer so that he would have a female counterpart to his Hardy Boys series. Nancy Drew first appeared back in 1930. She got a modernization update from 1959 to 1979. There was a later Nancy who was older, and her mysteries were infused with romance, no longer the original bold amateur sleuth. My era was the 59 to 79 books, and I found that Nancy to be an amateur sleuth who inspired imagination, adventure, and smarts in her readers. Over to you, Julie.
I'd so agree. I love Nancy Drew as well, and especially her little red sports car. Well, that's it for another exciting episode of Kendall and Cooper Talk Mysteries. We'd like to thank our very first middle grade mystery author, Stuart Gibbs, for joining us, and also thank our young guest interviewers, Anna, Sofia, and Michael. We enjoyed your book reviews, and we hope you do some more reviews and perhaps even some mystery writing. Who knows? Maybe someday we'll be interviewing each of you as debut novelists. Keep reading and keep writing. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.